Welcome to week 6. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about personas, give you some explanations about what personas are, why we use it in experience-centered design, and then I'll tell you step by step how you might want to create your personas in your team. So this is a typical picture of a persona that you find on Google. So if you just search on Google itself, you find a lot of personas. And this is a typical one. Now, I just want you to remember that what you see online may not be good personas. Okay, so that's a real problem because in my opinion, there are a lot of bad personas out there. So I'm going to use this one, a typical one, to show you some of the good and bad. So I've put a tick to it. All personas should have a picture of a person, and we'll talk about that later, but the picture should be a fictional picture, so it should not be a real person. Well, should not be a person of someone you interview. So just choose a picture that represents a person. Yes, the persona should also contain a full name of the person. And some biodata, some background. So for instance, here's age, location, marital status, kids, the living arrangement, occupation, salary, education, and all that kind of basic stuff. Okay. There's also, usually they put like a tagline on top. So to quite upfront of the persona itself to show basically one key idea about the person. So here is about the main challenge of the person with regards to this problem that they're designing for, or one wish or one idea. I would suggest that you choose one key characteristics about the person that you want to highlight in this section here. There are also stuff like, the current situation, about Sarah. So this person's called Sarah. So a bit more description about Sarah and who she is as a person. Okay, these are good stuff. And these are about her habits, her goals, what motivates her. Things that are not so good is usually things that uses all this slider stuff. Okay, this one is related to how much she uses, how much she knows about technology. I don't think the slider is a good way to represent this information because it doesn't tell me how much really. So it's just like close to here but not there. I want it to be a bit more explicit. So think carefully about not using sliders. Okay, so not using sliders. Another one is actually again the same thing. Works from home, plays video games, board games. Yes, but how much and who with, and so all the context, all the description about the activity is important, but we need to know how and where and who with and how often and what with. Okay, so you can present this, but think about creative ways of presenting this, but not in such a simplistic kind of way. Like for instance, also how long do they play? Like you play video games during the weekdays, but how long? So if a person only plays it like for half an hour every day, so that's not such a big thing, right? But most importantly, you want to think about how this helps you think about the solution at the end. Okay, so I've talked to you about what it looks like and what are the general things that people put into the persona and how you might lay it out and what to avoid. Okay, so let's go back to what personas are. Persona was actually created originally for user-centered design because researchers realized that once they've gone and talked to people and interviewed people, which is a good thing, when they come back to the office to do design, they kind of sometimes, it's very hard to convey who the people they have spoken to the other members of the team who did not go and interview the participants. Also, sometimes when you start doing design, you might end up forgetting or kind of forgetting bits and pieces of who the persons are that you actually interview. So having some sort of representation helps you to remind you of who these people are. Okay, so The personas that you create, and personas in general, are fictional. Fictional means they're not real. Okay, but they're based on real data, so they're based on the people you've spoken to. So basically, your persona that you create should be based on the information that you met, so you found from the people you've spoken to, that you collected from multiple individuals, so that you can represent them as different user types. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the different user type. So let's say you talk to 12 people in your team. So out of the 12, can you think about 3 different user types out of the 12? Okay, so maybe one is an advanced user, someone who uses a lot of technology, someone who uses moderate, and someone who doesn't use technology. Or you might think about, 3 different types of people that are quite different from each other from the group of people you interviewed. A persona represents people you interviewed. It is the representational artifact that prioritizes particular characteristics. So we only put some characteristics, some circumstances, and some aspect of the people. Okay, and you see that in the next slide. A good persona is like a character shade. So remember, like when you make a film, when you have write a play or have make a movie, you usually have actors who need to play certain characters. So a persona, in a way, have all the important information for an actor to sort of understand who they're playing. So the more information you give them, the more they're able to sort of understand, this person would act like this person would not like this person would believe in this or that, or not. Okay. It's also good to know that persona is often used in marketing as a design tool. And when you look at internet, be careful, because a lot of them are presented on the internet as marketing tools. So they're not so useful for you. Okay. To copy that. Okay, so don't copy them, because a lot of them are marketing, so they present different kind of information, and we don't want that kind of information. What we want are information that is useful for us to do design. Okay, so keep that in mind. What information would be useful for designing? Okay, so what it is that we need to have is actually the persona should remind different team members about who the users are. Because out of a team of 4, and if you've got 12 users, you have not met the other users, and none of you have met the other people's users. So the personas are for the team to sort of say, okay, these are the 3 people we're designing for. Okay, that represents the 12 that some of us, different people, have interviewed. Okay. And you can use the persona to answer some questions for yourself when you do ideation later on. When you try and think about a design idea, you go back to your persona and say, would this persona, Sarah, like this kind of design? Would Sarah like a touch screen? Would Sarah want to use this to enter her private information? So the more detailed and the more relevant your personas are, the better it is and the more useful it is for you to use down the track to answer some questions when you think about ideas, again, features. Okay, so personas also used to provide initial source of answers when you carry out early prototyping. So what usually is in a persona are like full name, photo, tagline, as I said before, the bio data. The current situation is very important, so the person's present. So what is it now? If a person is now studying in Sydney, but also what was before, okay, the backstory here, the past, how they came here, and what were some of the motivations? Why did they come overseas to study? Or if it's an office worker, was it always that they wanted to be an office worker, or was this the first job that they're in, or what does job before? Okay, the commitments and responsibilities. So what does the person have a husband? Does the person have a partner? Does the person have children, or just single, or living at home? Or what responsibility does the person have? Okay, what drives them? What do they think about the world? What gets them going? What are they interested in? Okay, so sorry, this keeps moving. And what are their preferences? What are their values? What are some of the things that they wish and fear? Okay, so who are they as a person? This takes up most of the space in your persona. And the less space should be devoted to technology use and preferences and familiarity. So don't just give me an icon of a phone, but tell me a little bit about what phone it is, how often they use the phone, what they use the phone for. Okay. The persona should be able to be used for different design projects with different research questions, but with similar users with little changes. So what I'm saying is that once you create a persona, let's say you've been interviewing university students from international sector, you should be able to use this persona not just to design a project involving music, but also you should be able to use that persona to be designing, let's say, for services for international students that would want at university. Okay. And finally, the ratio of the person to the context and technology changes as the project progresses. What I'm trying to say is that at the beginning, your persona would have more about who they are, okay, and less about the technology that they use. But as you progress with your designing, you would probably highlight more and include more information about the technology and the context of where they are, the house and stuff like that. So what I'm also saying is that although you create a persona in the beginning and arrange it in a certain way and have certain information, you should continuously update your persona. So create another version later on where maybe you reduce all the things about who they, what the name, well, you keep the name, maybe their age and their nationality, all that can be reduced because you're now familiar with them, but now you take more space, use that space and have more stuff about, let's say, if you're designing for the home, what the home is like, and maybe even have a plan of the home in the persona itself. Persona should be only one page, so not 2 pages or 3 pages. Easy to read from a short distance, so which means that the font size needs to be reasonably big, not too cluttered. It needs to be engaging, so when I look at it, I need to feel like I want to read it. Okay, if it's boring and it's not interesting for me, and believable. When I look at a persona, do I believe that's actually a real person, or have you put different things together that doesn't make sense? Okay. Most importantly, it's good to be representative. So it's got to be representing the people you have interviewed. Okay, that's why it's very important. And finally, it allows the reader, someone who looks at your persona, who has not met your participants, to be able to connect and to be able to empathize with the persona. A question for you. If ECD uses methods that support dialogue, can you explain how personas support dialogue in the design process? The next 3 slides are going to describe the steps in which you do this persona. So step 1, you transcribe the details from your recording. So here you got your recordings. So let's say there are 3 recordings here. And what you want to do is individually listen to each of the interview that you've created and transcribe the personal details. So just take all the personal details out of each person recording onto a separate profile sheet. So one person here, another person here, and a third person here. For instance, like name, hobbies, education, age, occupation. Okay, and once you do that, try to group them together and try and make them consistent across 3 profile shades. Okay, this profile shades is actually like a working document. You don't need to submit them. Every student create profile sheets for the people they interview. So each team would end up with 9 to 12 profile sheets. Okay, like that. So from the recordings, listen to it and write down the information on each of the profile sheet. Step 2, selecting information from the 12 profile sheets to create 3 draft personas. So here is where you shrink down from 12 to 3 or from 9 to 3. Okay, so the team will need to meet and review each profile. So you need to share each of this profile sheet with each other. Okay, so all of you need to have access in the team to all the profile sheet you have created. And then you need to sit down together online in the team meeting to discuss 3 possible fictional characters to create out of the 9 to 12. So how do we condense, how do we look at those 12 or 9 and think about 3 different people? How can we create 3 fictional people out of that? As I said before in the previous slides, think about 3 user types maybe, or think about 3 distinct, different type of persons of the people you have interviewed. Okay, if you're unsure, you should check with us. So each persona should have characteristic drawn directly from the profile. So let's say so the names doesn't need to be drawn from here. You can create a fictional name. You can create a fictional, just download a fictional picture, a picture of somebody. But let's say, where they live, their occupation, their preferences and stuff like that, it should be drawn from here. Okay, their feelings about certain things should be drawn from here. So all this should have information that are drawn from this profile shades. The three personas should be sufficiently different from each other. So it's very important that you make sure that those persona 1, persona 2, and 3 are different from each other. Okay, each persona can have some overlap characteristics, but ensure that as a whole, each persona is sufficiently different. So maybe they all go to university, so that's the overlap, but maybe they go to different universities, okay? But there are 3 different people, let's say university students, maybe one international student who's been here, let's say all 3 of them have just arrived this semester. One is working part-time, one comes from a family that is well-to-do and doesn't need to work. Another one maybe is actually not working and struggling, or maybe having relatives here that a person is living with. So you create 3 different groups of people, 3 different set of people. Finally, back to here, no persona should be a direct mapping of one profile shade. So do not do this. Do not say, okay, this person, I'm going to change that into a persona. I'm going to map this person directly and create persona 1. Persona 2 will be based on this, persona 3 based on that. Do not ever do that. So it should be a combination of different things from the profile shades that you have down to 3. It doesn't mean that you use everything. It just means that you choose what is relevant and put it together here. And so now that you've got 3 draft personas, you need to check, you need to refine, you need to finalize them. So as a team, you need to look at each draft persona. So look at all 3. Imagine the person. So think about the person, read through the person, look at the picture, look at the name, look at all the information and ask yourself, are the characteristics given to the person coherent and make sense? So do they work together? Is this person, comes from a wealthy family and yet this person is doing that? Oh, it doesn't make sense, right? So think about whether you have put things together that doesn't make sense. Is the person believable as a real person? Can you imagine a real person having those different information together? Okay. If not, make some minor changes. Maybe you need to look back at the profile shades and take something else and put there. But if it is, then fine. That's fine. You can finalize that. But make sure you check with each that they are still different from each other. Okay. And once you finish checking and they're different and they're believable and there seems to be individual, then you can create and present the final personas on 3 different documents. The 3 personas will be submitted by one member of each team, so represent the team, and submitted to a special discussion board which I will create on Canvas by 6 p.m. Of your class on week 8. Each team would also need to fill in a document that outlines the breakdown of work and contribution. So, who did what, how many percent that person did, and what did the person do. And then this document needs to be uploaded to your team page on Canvas. So I will go to Canvas and say, okay, for persona, who did what, who did the pictures, or who did all the condensing, or who shared the task in doing this, and how many percentage does each person work put into creating this persona. Okay, I'm going to stop here.